Entrepreneur MBA podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 10 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I'm co-founder of Financing Solutions, and Financing Solutions provides very easy to set up lines of credit for small businesses. We've been doing it for 12 years, and I will be your host for the Entrepreneur MBA podcast. If you are interested in learning more about a line of credit for your business, which I would highly recommend over 25 plus years of me being in business, I've almost always had a line of credit. I really believe in it. Please visit our website at fscreditline.com. Again, it's FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Over the last 25 years, I have built 6 companies in the $5 million to $25 million range, including 2 companies that have made the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in the United States. Like most entrepreneurs, I love learning from business, from people with business experience. And today I'm very excited to be speaking with Tim Lupinacci from Baker and Donelson. In today's dangerous, we have a sponsor now, and in today's really kind of dangerous world, cybersecurity has become such a big deal. And, it's really not a nice to have anymore. It's something that's a must have. And so if you're really having any issues with cybersecurity, if you don't even have a plan, take a look at Technology Management Group, or TMG. They've been doing it for 30 years. And if you just have a question or whatever, you can go to them and they'll help you with it, and, potentially help you in the long run. Their website is cyberctrl.net. Again, that's cyberctrl.net. Joining us today is Tim Lupinacci. He's the CEO and chair of Baker Donelson, where he leads over 1,300 individuals in 22 offices across the southeastern United States. Tim is presently leading the firm's 5-year Baker Vision 2028 strategy and its diversity and inclusion compact. A lifelong leadership student, Tim recently launched a nonprofit called Everybody Leads, focusing on and empowering, individuals in underserved communities with basic leadership skills and confidence to better lead themselves, lead others, and lead in the community. Tim, welcome to today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast.
Great, Stephen. It's great to meet you. I'm really honored to be here. And just to plug what you were talking about, the sponsor about cybersecurity, that is something so vital to every business, regardless of size. And we see it as well. So I could not agree more that is something everyone needs to look at, because it's such the reality of what we're living in. So.
Well, listen, I think it was 8 years ago with Financing Solutions. I have a business partner. I have 3 companies right now, but Financing Solutions, I have I have 2 of my companies. I have business partners, and maybe 8 years ago, we got our Google files got into them, and we had ransomware on it.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, we were backing everything up, and so we were able to pull it back off. But you never know how important it is until you really have a real problem, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree.
So today's podcast, Courage, Leadership in Volatile Times, Key Leadership Traits to Drive. I've been hearing a lot about these are volatile times. These are volatile times, right? And I don't know. I think it's always been a volatile time, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
listen, like I'm rewatching the series Mad Men, right? Because I a lot of times get something out of things when I've watched them a second time or whatever. It's a long series, and there's always something that's going on. Mad Men is what most people don't know about the series of Mad Men. It's a is it called an anthology? It's all about history. There's all history. It's going through all the seasons, from the JFK being shot to his brother getting shot to the Vietnam War to women's lib to the change from the Beatles to I'm sorry, change of the big band sound to the Beatles.
Yeah.
It's all this volatility that's going on. But do you think it's exasperated even more?
Well, it's a great question, Stephen, because it's funny. I've been the CEO and chair for 4.5 years, and so I came in, about a year, 8 months to the seat before COVID, right? And so when we had a 6-month transition, and in the middle of that transition, we had one of our worst fiscal years ever. So I'm now coming into the role where we'd had some stagnant performance, and then a down year. That was pretty volatile to me, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was
yeah,
pre-pandemic.
yeah.
So I think you're right that it's, and then of course, pandemic, because we didn't have a playbook for that, and all the uncertainty, it certainly felt exacerbated. But I think you make a good point. The one thing, at least it feels like and I feel like our leaders that in our organization, I hear from them, is just the acceleration and the hyper focus on everything. It doesn't maybe make it more volatile, but it's just coming faster and faster. That ends up where the whole idea of like we're stressed, the mental health and wellness, and we're not even having time to step back and breathe. So I agree with you, Steve, with the premise that it's always volatile. I mean, it's always uncertain. But I think it feels like it's accelerated a little bit more.
Well, and I think that's what we all have to get used to is the idea that it's not just change is going to happen, and it's going to come at you much faster. Right.
Yes.
And, I don't know where I heard it, read it, someone told me, change happens whether you want it or not.
Right.
It's gonna come. So I think as a business leader, you got to know that, okay, you got to know these are the things that are going to happen. You are going to have to go through a recession. You are going to have to go through a recession, a major recession. We haven't had a major recession in quite some time, and we're not in a recession now, just so everybody knows. Recession is a negative GDP. Okay. It doesn't mean things slow down. Okay. It means it's a negative GDP, which means it's going in reverse. Okay. But anyway, there's things that are going to come. And if you're, I'm 58. So if you're old,
I'm the same age. Yeah.
So you kind of been through it before. There's the pandemic. I would agree with you, Tim, in that the pandemic, that was unless you're Bill Gates, right? Because Bill Gates had been working on that idea and that every 100 years you're going to have a pandemic. And boy, he was right on it, right? So I think that's an aberration that was not going to happen in our lifetime again, probably,
Yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting you said that, because one thing you said reminded me, for some of us as leaders, because I think it's always going to be volatile. It's going to be uncertain. Is just the awareness of it. Because I was listening to someone in the last couple of weeks talking about that when we are in this hyper accelerated situation and we feel like we're not taking time for ourselves to step back for a little bit, that then a lot of the little cracks show up in our armor as leaders. Maybe we don't listen as well. We are a little shorter with people. We're not as creative in our thinking. Maybe we become more critical of others. Our empathy lapses. So I think that was eye-opening for me, because I'd noticed, you micromanage more because you feel like you don't have as much control. And I felt like I was starting to ease into those type of behaviors that really I've not really had before. And it was like, oh, well, maybe it's just because it's this stress that I'm under and the tension, and I'm not doing enough of what I like to call my daily disciplines of, running and reading and having some thought time and all of that. So it's really, I think as a leader in no matter what time you're in, it's really just being aware of yourself and everything.
It's interesting. So I do 2 podcasts. For our listeners don't know this. I do 2. I do the Entrepreneur MBA podcast, and I do the Nonprofit MBA podcast, which are geared toward nonprofits. And at the end of every single podcast that I do for the Nonprofit MBA podcast, I tell the executive directors this. I say, you guys are out there trying to save the world, and I thank you for that. Right. And I just want to remind you that you can't help anybody else. You can't help your employees. you can't help your cause, you can't help your kids, you can't help your significant other if you don't take care of yourself first.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what you're saying right now. Now, listen, I've always been amazing at taking good care of myself. I mean, I exercise every day, I always have. I always do a good job of mental health
Yeah.
on in other areas. And I would tell you the things that I've had to survive in not just business, but more recently in my personal life, which was I had a tragedy that happened.
Mm.
Um, the If I was not as physically fit, mentally and physically, I would have broken.
Right.
And so this is a discussion about leadership, right? And I
Yeah.
think, Tim, what you and I are embarking on talking about a little bit here is, with all this change coming, you better be physically and mentally ready for it.
I totally agree, and that's why, like, again, I call it my daily disciplines. It includes like eating well and getting enough
Yeah.
sleep, and I try to do. I've got some friends who are Jewish, and they practice Sabbath every week, and I really started investigating that. So I try to, for 24 hours, shut down from electronics, and I don't do it necessarily the Friday night to Saturday night like a lot of my colleagues do, but it works for me Saturday night to Sunday night to try to decompress, get away from everything. And not everyone can do that all the time. I don't do it
Yeah.
100% of the time, but those are the type of things I need to be my best for our people. They're looking to me to lead. And you're right. It's all about that is a significant part of leadership, is leading yourself and knowing how you can show up energized, innovative, leading. I mean, even what you were talking about, it's in these times of uncertainty when there's so much opportunity for companies, right, to outperform the market, but you got to be ready to do that. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and leadership is more important than it ever was. And this leads me into something I was thinking before. I was at. I want to articulate this without offending anybody. I was So I do competitive rowing, right? And
Yeah.
in my club, there's 70 people in my club, and there's a few people in their 70s who row, amazing shape. But they were all talking about their concerns with uh, transgenders, or wait. It was men who are biologically men rowing in a women's race and vice versa. And I was just listening, and I did end up saying something to them about it. But I realized, wow, they're in their 70s. This is a lot to handle, right? And they need to, and so I'm bringing this back to leadership, because you might be taking good care of yourself, and you might be good physically and mentally, but there's people who are working for you that can't handle this,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Right.
And we need to be able to be compassionate toward their ideas, instead of getting angry at them and trying to understand them. I mean, I would admit, I did come back at them, and I said, listen, I go, is it really going to affect you?
Mm.
These people who have these, they're struggling. They're struggling. Okay. And they're trying to find an identity, and I'm sure they're happier. And does it make a difference that they're going to be in a race? Is it really going to they're not in the Olympics. Okay. And I think that changed their perception a little bit. I
Yeah.
don't know if that was
Yeah.
leadership, but.
Well, no, I think there's so many things to unpack from what you just said, Stephen, because it is true. I mean, I think listening and being empathetic and not just jumping to a conclusion is good. I always talk about, when it comes to anything around diversity, inclusion, belonging, LGBTQ plus, everyone's on a different part of their journey, right? We all come from different backgrounds. I lived in Guadalajara, Mexico when I was growing up. And so I lived in a different culture, and I really was benefited by it. Others maybe haven't. And I always just encourage everyone, no matter where you are in your journey, just try to take a couple steps of understanding. Be curious, ask questions. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, But I think that is leadership, about the listening and trying to grow. And I've grown a lot by getting to know individuals who have different paths and journeys than me. So I do think that's important. The other thing that you mentioned, Stephen, which I think is important for leaders, is to model what you're talking about. As you said, you and I really devoted about know the importance of taking care of our health and our mind and mentally, physically, and all those ways. Well, talk about it. Encourage your colleagues to take vacations. And it's okay if you need to leave early someday. I know I have a problem where I feel guilty if somebody sees me walking out. I'm not giving my all to the company. Well, I've got to show that I'm giving my all while I'm here, but there are times I need to have time off. I talk very openly about the fact I talk to a counselor every 6 weeks or so, just to check in and have a safe space that I can process things and talk about it, and just talking about mental health and wellness. Now, you may have individuals who are in a place they need help, and you need to provide for them. You need to be empathetic. We try to provide resources to connect folks to resources, vendors on mental health and wellness, and counselors. But I think it's the modeling of it is pretty important too. So there's a lot you unpacked in that one little story. But,
Yeah. How has your leadership style changed over the years?
Yeah, first of it was I thinking and realizing I was a leader was one thing. I mean, I had a mentor who spoke into me when I was a young lawyer, that the reason he was aggravated about how I had dropped the ball on a couple things is I really wasn't stepping up as a leader to own the project. I was looking at it very transactionally. So a very important inflection point to me was just realizing, okay, I'm a leader, so I need to do something about this. I need to get better at it. And then I think I went through a phase where I really felt like leadership meant that I had to know all the answers and I had to get everything right, and I had to just keep driving forward. And I've really learned over time that I don't know everything. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but as I listen, as I commit myself to grow and learn and be curious, have more of like an inclusive leadership style, more of an empathetic style. Recognize I got to make the tough decisions. I got to be decisive. I have to lead. I have to be in front. And if I make mistakes, I have to acknowledge it. But I think trying to move beyond thinking I needed to, direct how everything happened because I now had a title. It was really more, how can I get everyone to come along and work together as a team? So those are a couple things that I've really learned through trial and error for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's what leadership is. I think how old were you when you were in some type of leadership position?
Gosh, the first, like an official title probably didn't happen until my 30s. I mean, I probably had some clubs in college, and I had a small team I was leading, in the firm when but it was probably my 30s, so 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, to make the correlation, this is a long time ago. I forget if it was a teacher or a principal at a school or somebody who said the way kids have to learn they have to try something on, and they see if it matches them, and then if it doesn't, then they don't do it again. But if it does, then they'll do it again. And so I think leadership is a little bit like that. Maybe you read about Abraham Lincoln, or you read something about someone that's famous, and you say, "Oh, well, that's leadership." And then you try it, and you see, "Oh, that fits or that doesn't." And I think you start off that way. And I think having the luxury. I think at some point in your career, again, this podcast is geared toward entrepreneurs that are under $10 million in sales and revenue. So, a lot of them are 2 million, 3 million in revenue. They want to get over the $10 million mark. That's the goal of this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't get to start working on leadership actively until your organization is starting to really, really run a little bit more on its own. Because then you carve out this time and you say, "Oh, okay, now I've done all the hard work. Now I can start focusing on the bigger picture, which is how do I lead this organization, right?" And did you find the same thing happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because now you get a title, but what does that mean, right? If you haven't, now I definitely used opportunities to try to invest in myself. Certainly by reading books. Somebody I heard, although book smart is one thing, but as you said earlier, it's all about the execution and putting it into practice. But at least that gives you some ideas about it. And there have been some books that have been influential. But one thing that somebody mentioned early on when I was in a leadership role was like the use of your downtime. What are you using your time for? And like even driving in the car, I had about a 30-minute commute each way, and I'm listening to sports radio or listening to the news. And they said, well, what if you listen to, nowadays you do podcasts on leadership or books on tape or books on audio, whatever, Audible. That's like a university in your car, right? My Camry became like, I'm learning leadership by just listening. And now I can apply those ideas. And invariably, I know you know this, Stephen, if you're dealing with a real important issue that you're really struggling with, if you're reading something, sometimes something clicks, right? Because you're now thinking about it and somebody has a different idea. So I definitely think for those leaders that are new in the role, it really is to just invest in yourself and keep learning and growing.
I agree.
And talking to other leaders who have gone before you, like that's another thing. Set up calls. Tell someone you'll give them, $100 to their favorite charity for an hour of their time just to pick their brain about something who's already an established leader. I did that occasionally. So anyway, those are some things I did early on.
I think there's some things that I did that were very, very helpful for leadership. Number one is I had a mentor for 25 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, I had a support group of 9 other business owners, and we're still together for 25 years. So
that's awesome.
That you need that because honestly, there's a lot of people who they might be your friends. It could be your significant other. They really they may not understand what it's like to be in your shoes.
Right.
So it's good to have people who are in your profession and in your position. And so, I, like you, when I started moving into more the ability to start working more on leadership, I read lots of books, right? And I started thinking a lot more about it. And I went to some lectures, and like you said, now the podcasts, it's so much easier. And I think the fact of you just saying, what type of leader am I now? What type of leader do I want to be? And where what's the gap and how do I bridge that gap?
Exactly.
I think that's the kind of the important part.
Well, it's almost like your plan, right? I mean, you come up with what's your intentional plan to get from here to there, the leader you want to be and you aspire to be. And then if you have some blind spots or have some gaps or blind spots that others have called into you or you have gaps, okay, what are you going to do about it, right? I mean, how are you going to get better at that? Like I know one of the areas I have been challenged with as I've grown as a leader is I really like people to like me, right? I like people generally. And so sometimes that flies in the face of having to make some hard decisions. And so I know I still get feedback about, I could do better at trying to become more decisive. And so I just have to be mindful of it. But then I have to do that. Now, again, I'm still always going to be the person who wants a lot of feedback. But then I have to go ahead and make the call and do it and not let it languish. And so I work on it every day. But it's something that then I read a little bit more about, some about decisiveness and having tough conversations, and that's kind of helping me with that. So, yeah, I totally agree with you, Stephen. Think about it, identify it, and get a plan. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of mine, too. So my second company grew really fast. It was really good. And I was young. I was 33. And I really hadn't been in a leadership role before. And I really found that I was treating my employees terribly. I was losing my temper all the time. And I finally, went to see a psychologist. And I said, I feel like I treat my employees terrible. And I'm by nature a really good person. I mean, maybe everybody thinks that I just, but I'm very driven. And that's the problem that a lot of entrepreneurs have. Or successful, ambitious, let's say ambitious people, not successful. They are very driven and they don't know why anybody else isn't. right?
Right.
You know, and
Guilty. I'm guilty.
yeah,
Yep.
we all are. So, and I, I wasn't good at articulating any type of that, and so I went to see a psychologist, and I went in there, and it's a kind of a funny story. So I go in there and I tell her, I don't like the way I'm treating my employees, and I feel like I'm getting angry all the time, and this is like well before anybody started using. There's no such thing as a coach. There's no
Right.
such, very few people use psychologists to help you with your
Yes.
work, right? Which
Yeah.
is
Right.
nowadays, I think that's the future of workplace. But and so she has this. I'm a big guy. I'm very muscular, tall, and so she has this camera that's pointed right on me, and she's like, she's worried that I'm gonna beat the crap out of her, when I get angry, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so 6 months of a therapy. I don't know, maybe it was 4 months. And what I learned out of that was she taught me. Her job was to, announced it to me. Her job was to get me angry and frustrated. And then what happened was I saw the correlation between how dumb I got,
Uh,
because I would get so angry I couldn't think of anything other than being angry. And that automatically, when I started going to work, whenever I felt I was getting angry at work or frustrated, I would say a trigger. I would say,
yeah.
let me think about it. Let me,
Mm.
someone would be talking to me, I'd be getting angry. I'd be like, let me think about it, and it gave me time to cool down. Right. And
Yeah.
it's worked. And now it's second nature for me not to lose my temper.
Right. But I love that. Yeah, I love that, having that trigger, because, and that to me is one of the biggest things about leadership is being self-aware and recognizing those triggers, that you need to then take that pause. Let me think
Yeah.
about it. I love that. That's really wise.
I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but I found too, that because I'm 58 now, my testosterone level isn't as high as it used to be. And that's helped, like me making better decisions, in that I'm a little bit more patient. I listen better. Do you find that too, that age has helped?
Well, it definitely has helped in the wisdom of knowing mistakes I've made before by jumping the gun, or thinking I know what that person's trying to, get across, or thinking I'm putting myself in their mind. I think I'm wiser now from the battle scars to be more patient and listen. And I think the flip of it too is with the aging, it's become even more important that I'm doing the exercising and the eating well and the sleeping well, because I need that energy. And it's like, I don't bounce back quite as fast if I'm not doing that. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
How about this? This is a big, change in what we're talking to.
Yeah.
Managing women versus men, managing people who have alternative lifestyles versus, you know, uh, you know, what's considered normal. I don't even like that word. I can't think of the right word. With the variety of types of people that we have to work with now, um, what has changed in your leadership
Yeah.
persona?
You know, no, I think that's great. I don't know. Good question. I don't know that anything changed, because I think the important for all of us as leaders is to really spend the time to get to know every
Yep.
individual on the team, regardless of, like I said, their background, gender, diversity. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got something that they're bringing to the table to add. I love, you talked about Lincoln as a great leader. I'm very influenced by a lot of reading about Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And he always used this idea of dinner table diplomacy to really get to know people, to then ultimately try to drive change, right? Or to try to drive whatever his agenda was. I'm a big fan of, every time I've gotten a new leadership role, I get lunch and we sit down and just get to understand the person, because everyone's got these unique strengths. There's all kinds of data that, if we all have the same thought and came from the same journey, we're probably not going to give the best advice, right? The different perspectives, different. I have colleagues who have been in industry before they came to law. That's a really important perspective that I don't have, because I went straight into law. So I think to me, it's regardless of what your background is. It's a leader, just get to know your team individually, one off. I have weekly team meetings with our executive team, but I also have scheduled time to get to know them one-on-one and know what they enjoy doing, and then trying to step into what they enjoy doing. I mean, my CFO likes to golf. I can golf okay. And so I'll go golf with him. Whereas my COO would enjoy as much talking about Disney World, right? And so we talk about Disney World. And so it's knowing all those disparate, distinct traits that can help get us better. So that's kind of how I've approached it. I don't know that I've changed anything. So I think it's the same as just getting to know every individual.
You find that because you're trying to be a great leader, a better leader, let's just keep it that way, right? That your last resort, you wouldn't even think about it, is to get rid of somebody.
Yeah.
And is that a problem? Because it really is the right thing for them and for you. And yet you're like, I want to be a great leader, and great leaders make things work. And it's hard to find people. And I have this body, and I should be able to work with them. And I can tell, Tim, that you're a good guy by nature, right?
Yeah.
And there must be that conflict that goes on with you quite a bit.
Oh, internally, it's hard. It's among the hardest thing I've done. And some of it has just come out of the necessity about what's the best interest of the organization. It really started back. I was leading a business unit back at the time of the last recession, actually through the recession. But then as the economy got better, we had really ramped up teams to help with a lot of the mortgage litigation crisis and bankruptcy. And we just had to let people go. It just was. And so that was something I didn't want to do it, but we just needed to do it as the economy shifted, the practices did. So that helped build a little bit of a muscle. It's never easy for me, but I could see just treating people with respect, dignity, allowing them to they can give the message about why they're leaving, even giving some time for that and space. I think that's a way to do it. But then now in this role as CEO, there have been instances where some of our top producers have just been really challenging to our culture of trying to work together, trying to treat people with respect. And we've had to let some of our top performers go. And that's been hard, not only because it's going to be a revenue hit, but it's also just the personal involved. Now, I've usually will have spent a lot of time investing in the people when there's been challenging things around culture or maybe not acting the best around others and how they treat people. I'll try to build like a pathway for them to get better. Maybe that's through coaching or through counseling or trying to understand that. And if they're not willing and open to that, and then the problems persist, we've had to let people go. And again, we try to do it with dignity. Let them be the ones who say, yeah, I'm leaving to pursue other opportunities. But you have to do it. It's the best interest of the organization. So that is a piece of leadership, no matter what the size of your company. You just have to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I tell you, well, what the heck's that sound? Do you hear that? Oh, man. It's just really, okay, there it goes. It went away on my end. Sorry about that. I think I was the worst leader for like 5 years. I think I was really, really bad. And but I'm working on it. Do you think you were a really bad leader from the very beginning? Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we're going to have to wrap this up. Or I think I'm having some audio problems. But let me just wrap this up. Unfortunately, we have some issues here. I just want to thank Tim Lupinacci from Baker and Donelson for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And please give us a review if you like today's podcast or any of the other ones, as long as it's 5 stars. It helps us get the word out. And if you're looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. Again, that's fscreditline.com. Tim, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that? Yes. Great. I appreciate it. That's awesome. All right, everybody. Again, I want to thank you. I think the takeaway that we should all have from today was that we really should just keep working on being better leaders. I think that's one of the key ingredients in successful business owner. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Take care of yourself, too.